There is a name that heaven shouted at the moment the first war was fought. Not a battle cry, not a rallying slogan invented after the fact by the victors. A question, a challenge thrown into the face of rebellion with the force of absolute conviction. The name is not a name in the way that human names are names. It is a declaration of allegiance. It is a theological position compressed into a single phrase and carried like a weapon into the center of a war that no one who had not witnessed it could fully imagine. The name is Michael, and in the original language it means, "Who is like God?" That question has no answer. That is the entire point. He asked it because the being standing across from him had decided, against all evidence and reason, that the answer might be himself. And Michael walked into the oldest conflict in the created order with a name that was also the terms of the argument. This is not a story about power. What Michael represents is something far rarer and far more costly than power. He represents the decision, made freely by a being who had every capacity to choose otherwise, to place his strength at the disposal of something greater than himself, to be the instrument rather than the agent, to be the weapon held by the hand of God rather than a God who holds his own weapons. This story will tell you something about war, but what it is really about is what happens when a creature of enormous capacity understands what capacity is actually for. The light in heaven before the rebellion is difficult to describe without sounding like the description has been simplified for people who cannot handle the complexity. So let it be simple. And let the simplicity carry the weight it is designed to carry. Every being who existed in heaven had been made with intention, not in the way that a tool is made with intention, designed for a function, dispensable when the function is complete. Made with intention the way a child is made with intention, called into existence by someone who wanted the specific reality of that specific being, who looked at the idea of them and said, "Yes, this should exist." Michael was one of those beings. What distinguished Michael was the quality of his attention. He paid attention to what mattered. There is always the temptation, even among beings created to worship and serve, to make the service about the servant, to let the role become the identity, to let the capacity for service become the source of pride rather than the occasion for humility. Michael never did this, not because he was incapable of it, because he understood something that Lucifer, for all his brilliance, did not understand, that the only freedom available to a created being is not the freedom to become the source, but the freedom to choose how fully you align with the source. That the alternatives are not self-authorship and servitude. The alternatives are chosen devotion and the particular kind of slavery that presents itself as liberation. He served, not reluctantly, not as a creature who had been compelled into a role he resented, but with the full commitment of someone who had looked at the options and chosen this one without reservation. And then, the morning came when someone else had made a different choice. Michael felt it before he heard it. The light had a quality it had not had the day before, a quality of tension, of something pulled almost to its breaking point. In the halls where angels moved in the rhythms of worship and service that had structured every moment since their creation, the rhythm was off. Not broken yet, but off. He went looking for the source of it. What he found was Lucifer speaking. What Lucifer was saying had the structure of a question, but the function of a proclamation. He was not asking whether the arrangement of heaven was just. He was announcing that it was not, in language designed to sound like inquiry while performing the work of insurrection. He was gathering an audience, and the audience was listening because Lucifer was the most beautiful and eloquent being in creation, and what he was saying had been crafted with the same artistry that had crafted everything else about him. Michael stood at the edge of the gathering and listened. He understood immediately what was happening. He understood it the way a physician understands a diagnosis, not from uncertainty working toward clarity, but from a recognition so immediate that the understanding and the seeing were the same event. Lucifer was not asking a question. Lucifer was recruiting. And the thing he was recruiting for was not a better version of heaven. It was the replacement of heaven with something that had Lucifer at the center of it. Michael turned and walked away from the gathering and went to report what he had heard. Because that is what you do when you are a guardian and you see the thing you have been assigned to guard beginning to crack. You do not stand at the edge and wonder whether the crack is serious. You do not wait for consensus. You go to the one you serve and you say, "Something is happening, and here is what I saw." He walked back toward the throne. The war was already beginning. He just did not know yet how large it would become. The war in heaven is described in Revelation in language that sounds compressed, the way all descriptions of enormous events sound compressed. A great sign appeared in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. What the account does not give you is the before. The before matters enormously. Michael had not wanted this war. By the time it begins, the period of conversation is over. Every angel who is going to be persuaded by the argument for fidelity has been persuaded. And every angel who is going to be seduced by the promise of autonomy has been seduced. The lines have been drawn. Michael led the faithful. He did not lead them because he was the most powerful or the most senior or the most eloquent. He led them because when the moment came for someone to step forward and hold the line, he was already there. He was already there because the whole orientation of his existence had been preparation for exactly this. The moment when what you believe is tested by what you are willing to do in its defense. Lucifer led the other side. Lucifer was not a cartoonish villain. He was magnificent, the most brilliantly constructed being in the created order. He had been given more of everything, more beauty, more intelligence, more capacity for the kind of presence that makes other beings feel the weight of their smallness. He had been given more, and he had decided that more was not enough. That decision is the precise shape of every catastrophic choice ever made. The conclusion that what has been given is insufficient. The conviction that the boundary between what you are and what you might be could be crossed without cost. Michael understood this. He understood it not abstractly, but at the level of personal recognition, because Michael had been given much too, and he had faced the same horizon that Lucifer faced, the same question of what to do with the endowment you have been given. And he had answered the question differently. Not with less desire, with a different desire. Michael fought his way through that argument with everything he had. When it was over, Lucifer and his angels were cast out. The place they had held in the created order, all of it gone. Not destroyed, inverted. turned against the thing it had been created to serve. Michael stood in the aftermath and looked at what victory cost. Because the war was not over. It had simply moved. When God made humanity, Michael watched. He had watched God make many things: stars, galaxies, orders of angels. He had watched the creation of the visible world with its impossible intricacy. But this was different. God reached down into the dust of the earth and shaped something, and then breathed into it, and the dust became a person. A being who had come from the ground. A being who was, in its composition, the earth itself made conscious and self-aware and capable of relationship. A being who would need food and sleep and other beings like itself. A being who could be hurt. A being who would die. And God loved this being with a specificity that Michael had not seen directed at any other created thing. He placed it in a garden, gave it work, gave it one prohibition, and watched to see what the being would do with its freedom. Michael understood the stakes. He had led the army that fought the beings who had made exactly that choice, and he knew what the wrong choice cost. And now there was a garden with a man and a woman in it, and somewhere in the vicinity of that garden was the being who had been cast out of heaven, not destroyed, not imprisoned beyond all access to the created order, but present, moving, looking for an entry point. The serpent is the being who had been the most brilliant creature in heaven, finding a form appropriate to the work he intended to do. Michael could not intervene, not because God was absent or indifferent, but because intervention would take from the man and the woman the very thing that made their love for God meaningful: the freedom to choose. Love that cannot choose otherwise is not love. It is mechanism. So Michael watched. He watched the conversation at the tree. He heard the question the serpent asked. Not a straightforward lie, but a question designed to introduce doubt about what God had actually said, followed by a reassurance designed to make the prohibition seem like deprivation. He watched the woman look at the fruit. He watched the decision form behind her eyes. He watched the moment the world changed. When they ate, Michael felt it in the same way he had felt the first tremors of Lucifer's rebellion. A change in the quality of the air, a tension in the light, the sense of something pulled beyond its designed tolerance. The garden could no longer be what it had been, not because God withdrew in anger, but because the presence of what had entered them could not coexist with what the garden was designed to hold. They were sent out. The way back was sealed. And Michael stood at the border of what had been lost, with a grief that had no bottom to it, and understood that everything that came after would be shaped by what had just happened in that garden. The war had moved again. Now it was inside the human heart. The centuries that followed the garden are the long middle of the story, and Michael was present for all of them. Often the work of a guardian is not a battle, it is a presence. The steady holding of the line against erosion that happens not in catastrophic moments, but in the slow accumulation of small yieldings. He guarded Israel. This is what the book of Daniel records, and the record is worth taking seriously because Daniel was a man who had seen things that qualified him to speak about such matters. A man who had survived a lion's den, who had watched his friends walk into a furnace and come out unburned, who had been given visions of the future so specific that historians have spent centuries arguing about whether they were written before or after the events they describe. Daniel was told, "Michael is the great prince who stands guard over your people." Not stands guard occasionally, not stands guard when the situation seems to warrant it. Stands guard, present tense, continuous action. The posture of permanent attention directed at a specific people for a specific purpose. When Sennacherib surrounded Jerusalem, 185,000 soldiers died in a single night. The army that seemed unstoppable was gone before sunrise. The Bible does not name the agent. The tradition knows. When 3 young men were thrown into a furnace heated 7 times beyond its normal temperature, the king who threw them in looked through the heat and saw 4 figures walking in the fire instead of 3. He described the 4th as looking like a son of the gods. The 3 came out without a hair singed, without the smell of smoke on their clothing. These are not isolated incidents. They are data points in a pattern that stretches across centuries of human history. The pattern of a guardian who does not tire, who does not abandon his post when the work becomes difficult, who does not step back from the assignment because the people he is guarding have not always been faithful to the one who sent him. He guarded them when they were faithful. He guarded them when they were not. He guarded them through exile and return, through conquest and persecution, through every attempt by every successive empire to erase what God had designated as permanent. Not because they deserved it more than others, because the guardian had been assigned. The work of guardianship is mostly not dramatic. Most of what Michael did in those centuries nobody saw. The city that did not fall, the family that did not starve, the moment of despair that somehow became the morning. None of it makes the text, but it was all part of the work. There is a story told in one verse of the letter of Jude that has fascinated readers since the moment it was written. The verse is brief. The event it describes is enormous. Yet Michael the Archangel, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." The body of Moses. Moses was the man who stood before Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," who stretched his hand over the sea and watched it divide, whose face shone so brilliantly after his encounters with God that the people around him could not look at him directly. And Moses died on Mount Nebo, and God buried him, and no one knows the location of his grave. There is a reason for that. The hidden burial was deliberate, and the story in Jude tells you what the reason was. The being who had been cast out of heaven, who had moved through the garden as a serpent, who had been present in every moment of human history as the adversary, this being wanted the body of Moses. Maybe what happens of manipulation. The adversary's entire playbook is the inversion of the sacred, the turning of holy things toward his own purposes. Michael was sent to prevent it. And what Michael did in that moment is perhaps the most revealing thing the scripture records about the nature of genuine spiritual authority. He did not fight. He did not argue. He did not produce a lengthy case for why the claim of the adversary was illegitimate. He did not even speak in his own name or on the basis of his own power. He said, "The Lord rebuke you." 4 words. Not Michael's authority, God's authority invoked by Michael. Not a personal victory, an acknowledgement that the power in the room was not his, and that the right response to the adversary was not to try to match him, but to direct the encounter toward the one who had already matched him and won. This is a different kind of courage than the kind shown on the battlefield. The battlefield courage of Michael in the war in heaven is comprehensible. It is the courage of a warrior who has been trained for this, who knows the purpose of the conflict, who can feel the justice of the cause in every movement of his sword arm. That courage is real, but it is also the kind of courage that makes narrative sense, that has drama and momentum and the satisfying shape of a story with a climax. What Michael does at the grave of Moses is quieter. The courage of self-effacement, of knowing you are more effective as an instrument than as an agent, choosing not to display genuine power, not from uncertainty, but from certainty about whose power matters. The Lord rebuke you, not I rebuke you. The distinction is everything. There is a final accounting in the book of Revelation, and Michael is at the center of it. The dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. What the passage establishes is this: there is a final moment, a final confrontation, a point at which the conflict that began in heaven with Lucifer's rebellion, that moved into the garden with the serpent's deception, that ran through the entire arc of human history in 1,000 forms and 1,000 theaters, finally reaches its conclusion. And Michael is still there, still at his post, after everything, after the war, the garden, the centuries of guardianship, still present, still faithful, still the one who steps forward when the moment requires it. This is worth dwelling on. Michael has been doing what he was supposed to do for longer than human history. He was present before the garden. He will be present at the end. The entire arc of the story, from creation through catastrophe, through redemption, through restoration, Michael is there, not as the hero, but as the one who defends the hero's work, not as the author, but as the one who protects the author's text from those who would alter it. In the final confrontation, what is being defeated is something that has been the adversary for so long that opposition is all it knows. The rebel who became the enemy, the angel who became the accuser, the creature of light who became the embodiment of everything light is not. Michael fights that, not for glory, not for vindication, not because he needs to prove something, because the work is not done until it is done, and the guardian does not leave his post before the watch is ended. Who is like God? The question has been asked in various forms by every human being who has ever stood in the middle of a difficulty that exceeded their capacity to resolve it. It has been asked by the person who has run out of options. It has been asked by the person who has realized that the thing they are facing is larger than anything they can produce in response to it. It has been asked at the edge of death. It has been asked at the beginning of something so large that even imagining its completion feels presumptuous. The question does not usually come with a name attached to it. It does not usually come with an army. But the content of the question is the same content that Michael carried into the first war. The acknowledgement that there is a reality larger than the questioner. The recognition that the being who made the world has not abdicated governance of it. The refusal to confuse the visible power of the adversary with the actual power structure of the universe. When the Israelites looked at the Anakim, giants who made an entire generation feel like insects, they answered the question of who is like God by saying, "Those giants are." And the answer paralyzed them for 40 years. Joshua and Caleb answered with the same question Michael had asked, not with data about the size of the giants relative to the army, but with a question about the size of God relative to everything else. And the question produced movement instead of paralysis. David answered it in the valley of Elah. You come with sword and spear. I come in the name of the Lord of armies. The stone found the giant's forehead. The giant fell. Who is like God? The answer, when given not as theology, but as lived conviction, always does the same thing. It defeats the giant. Not by making the giant smaller, by correctly locating where the actual power is. Michael is the mirror. Not because he is famous, or because his story is dramatic, or because the narrative of the archangel warrior has captured human imagination across thousands of years of art and literature and devotion. He is the mirror because of what his story shows you about the thing that actually decides outcomes. It is not power. All the fire and armies and interventions are real and extraordinary, but none of that is the point. The point is what the power is in service of, and the point is the consistency. The fact that the same being who leads the armies of heaven says, at a grave in the wilderness, the Lord rebuke you, not I rebuke you. The same being who defeats the rebellion says, when offered the opportunity to act on his own authority, no, not my authority, his. This is what the story is about. This is what every account of Michael, from the war in heaven to the dispute at the grave to the final confrontation in the last pages of the Bible, is saying in different registers about the same truth. The thing that makes power effective is not the power. It is the alignment with something larger than itself. The thing that makes courage sustainable is not the courage. It is the clarity about what the courage is for. Michael is an example of what any created being can be when it decides, with full freedom, under no compulsion, to place what it has been given entirely in the service of the one who gave it. The world celebrates the self-made, the self-determining. The story of Michael stands against that, not by condemning autonomy, but by demonstrating the cost of its counterproductive form. Lucifer was autonomous. He aimed what had been given him at himself. And what he produced was not a better version of heaven. It was the adversary. The being who walks through every age of human history, trying to take from people the freedom to say yes to the one who made them. Michael is what happens when the freedom goes the other way. He is what you get when a being of enormous capacity, facing the full range of options that freedom makes available, looks at those options and says, I choose to be what I was made to be. I choose to serve the one who made me, not because I have to. Because when I look at what the other choice produces, and when I look at what this choice makes possible, there is no comparison. The question is not who is like God. Nothing is like God. The question is what you do with that answer. There is a habit of reading the stories of figures like Michael as accounts of beings so far beyond ordinary human experience that the stories have no personal application. They are cosmic events involving powers and authorities and principalities that ordinary people never encounter directly. They belong to a category of experience so elevated that the appropriate response is admiration from a distance, the way you admire a mountain from the road without imagining yourself on it. This reading is wrong. Not because ordinary people will lead armies of angels, but because the choice Michael made is available to every person in every moment of every day. The choice to align, to take what you have been given and aim it at something larger than yourself, to ask the question that is his name, not as a theological curiosity, but as a personal orientation. Who is actually like God? And to let that answer govern the next thing you do. The giants are real. The valleys are real. The moments when the visible power of the adversary seems so overwhelming that the only honest response is to feel like a grasshopper, those moments are real. And so is the question, who is like God? The answer has not changed. It did not change in the war in heaven. It did not change at the grave of Moses. It did not change in the furnace or outside the walls of Jerusalem, or in the valley where a shepherd boy chose 5 smooth stones. It will not change at the end. Michael knew this before the first war began. He has been carrying the answer across the entire span of created history, in the medium of service and guardianship, and the particular kind of courage that does not need applause because it already knows whose opinion is the only one that matters. No one is like God. Nothing in the created order. Nothing in the uncreated darkness. And everything that flows from knowing that, truly knowing it, not as information, but as the foundation of every decision you make. Everything that flows from that is the life that Michael has been living since before the morning stars sang together. That life is still available. The question is still standing. You know the answer. You have always known it. Now live it.